INDIKA is one of the weirdest games I've ever played, but it might just also be one of the best. Blending a retro aesthetic through its flashbacks and music with some pretty realistic visuals and an interestingly shot assortment of cutscenes, this is unlike anything you've ever played before. And to be honest, that's all it took to draw me in. But just how exactly does this unconventional amalgamation come together to create a cohesive and enjoyable experience? Let's take a look and find out. Your first half an hour or so with INDIKA will be spent completing fairly menial tasks. But don't get me wrong, that is almost definitely intentional. At no point did the developers think they were creating an engaging gameplay loop with these frankly boring chores. Instead, they put you in the shoes of INDIKA as she questions the point of not only these tasks, but her entire faith, which I'm sure will resonate with a lot of players. But even if it means nothing to you, what this does from a gameplay perspective is create a contrast between her monotonous life in the monastery and the eventful puzzles and action sequences found outside of its walls. And while you shouldn't expect any combat, the puzzles are where INDIKA really shines, combining the occasional Resident Evil style object interactions with some genuinely engaging and inventive brain teasers, some of which will break the conventions of its genre and force you to think outside of the box. This juxtaposition between the honest but boring life of a nun and the sinful but exciting gameplay found in the wider world is exemplified by the voice inside of INDIKA's head, the devil. This impressively performed character will give rise to some of the game's biggest moral questions.
The priest imposes a different penance for different sins, and since you know for sure which is better or worse, there has to be a way of measuring.
And is also the source of a lot of funny moments.
First, you got pushed out of your house, and then out of the monastery.
You might think that a blend of philosophy and comedy is a recipe for disaster, but the game pulls it off in a way that's difficult to articulate. In a sense, it knows exactly when to pull its punches as to not feel overly preachy, while eventually hitting you over the head with a baseball bat when you least expect it. The narrative I experienced in INDIKA had me engaged, deep in thought, and above all else, disturbed. These are feelings that stuck with me long after I reached the credits, and I doubt I'll forget them anytime soon. The connection I developed with INDIKA across the game's 4-hour campaign is truly remarkable. She's intensely flawed, but profoundly relatable, what some might describe as the perfect depiction of a sinner. I really could go on for hours about what exactly this game is trying to say, but because I want to avoid spoilers, and honestly, I think it will affect everyone differently, I won't say too much. But just know that I haven't been this moved by a game in a long time. The aforementioned relationship you form with the protagonist is greatly assisted by her intricately detailed facial animations. Every slight change in expression can be recognized and read into just as you would with a real person. And although not all of the characters get this treatment, the visuals as a whole are still very impressive, especially when you realize this is an indie game. The level of detail in every unique environment and interior is absolutely mind-blowing, and I'm not sure what exactly they're using for the lighting, but it does look really good, all while running at a very high frame rate with the occasional stutter when first loading into a level, so the 3D graphics look incredible. But what about the other side of the game's visuals? Well, I'm pleased to report that the pixel art used in the game's flashbacks is just as well made, and acts as a colourful change of pace from the game's otherwise intentionally dull palette. One of the things that made a lot of people interested in this game is its unique presentation. Cutscenes often employ an almost artsy style, which can certainly sound bizarre, but it's not all Dutch angles and fisheye lenses, and there's just enough to make the game feel unique without being overly quirky. In summary, INDIKA is an incredibly unique experience that isn't afraid to ask some of life's biggest questions. With its interesting and varied visual presentation, along with some inventive and engaging puzzles, it's an outstanding display of what indie developers can offer to the medium of video games.